Back in the USA, President Trump returned from his whirlwind trip to Asia. I'll talk with the Post Washington reporter Caitlin Dornbos about his souvenir, a major new trade deal. Plus, foul ball. Another week, another Major League scandal. This one involves the Major League Baseball Players Association and the misuse of millions of dollars. I'll explain everything. And a 6-year-old shooter. Who's to blame when a first grader fires a gun at his teacher? The victim says the school principal could have and should have stepped in. Those stories and more today, Friday, October 31st. Happy Halloween. I'm Caitlin Becker, and this is the New York Postcast. The feds are investigating a youth baseball company that was created and owned by the Major League Baseball Players Association for misusing millions of dollars. Is nothing sacred? Not even the kids. The MLBPA is the union for all of the big baseball stars you love. Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, all of them. Now, they created a company called Players Way, which is based in Florida. The company has spent $3.9 million, but has not brought in nearly that much money, which is, of course, what made the feds perk up. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn, yes, the very same one that brought you last week's big sports scandal with the mafia and the NBA, they're also investigating this, according to ESPN. Players Way launched in 2019 as the official youth development initiative of the MLBPA, and it's supported by both current and former players. If you have a kid that plays club sports of any kind, you know how this works, but maybe not this part. The executive director of the association, Tony Clark, allegedly approved big, fat, 6-figure payments to Players Way, which an ex-official called a, quote, total waste of money. Then, last year, an anonymous complaint was filed accusing Clark of self-dealing, misuse of resources, and abuse of power. It also added claims of nepotism because his daughter once worked for the group. As if that weren't enough, Players Way held only about a dozen events between 2019 and 2024, but once word of the investigation got to them, surprise, all of a sudden, more events. Now, no charges have been filed yet, but this is one I'm going to be sure to keep an eye on. One of the most watched elections in the country is just 4 days away, and it's a dead heat. In the New Jersey governor's race, Democratic Congresswoman Mikey Sherrill, who led by a whopping 20 points this summer, is now ahead by just a single percentage point against a Republican rival, Jack Ciattarelli, 49 to 48%, according to the latest Emerson poll. Now, if past is prelude, Ciattarelli could be in even better shape. Here's why. In 2021, a widely viewed polling average undercounted his performance against now term-limited Governor Phil Murphy by 5 points. In 2024, President Trump lost the state to Kamala Harris, but performed better than anyone would have expected, losing by less than 6 points. But before the Ciattarelli campaign starts blowing up their red, white, and blue balloons, it bears mentioning that early voting data is looking pretty good for Mikey Sherrill. 54% of votes cast early have been registered Democrats, and just 28% are registered Republicans. As I've talked about on the pod a few times now, New Jersey, as well as Virginia, that governor's race there, and the New York City's mayoral race, they're all being closely watched for any signs that could help handicap next year's midterms for either party nationally. Who's responsible for a first grader shooting his teacher? That's the question at the heart of a headline-grabbing civil suit in Virginia. Abby Zwerner survived the shooting, and now she's suing the school's principal, claiming she repeatedly ignored warnings from multiple teachers that the boy had a gun, allegedly saying at one point he has little pockets. Lawyers for the now former principal, Ebony Parker, argued, quote, no one could have imagined that a 6-year-old first grade student would bring a firearm into school. Agreed. No one would imagine that. But the point the victim is making is that she didn't have to. Allegedly, she was told, again, multiple times. And it seems that she might have a case. The school district's director of human resources testified that days after the shooting, Parker admitted to her that she was told the boy had a gun in his backpack 90 minutes before the incident occurred. Now, this is a civil case, but Parker is also facing criminal charges of child neglect. The boy's mother was sentenced in 2023 to 2 years in prison on a similar charge for her son taking the 9mm handgun out of her purse. The child was not charged and is currently being raised by relatives. President Trump is back home after a jam-packed 3-nation swing through Asia, complete with party favors like his shiny new gold South Korean crown. But arguably, the president's biggest meeting of the trip was with Chinese President Xi Jinping. Before the meeting, Trump predicted success, and it was caught in a hot mic moment, telling a group of leaders gathered for lunch, quote, we're going to have something that's going to be very, very satisfactory to China and to us. I think it's going to be a very good meeting. It seems he was right. Shortly after the two leaders sat down, Trump announced a trade deal between the two countries and told reporters on Air Force One that the meeting was a 12 out of 10. He added that the deal will have to be renegotiated every year, but believed it would, quote, go on for a long time. So, what's the art of the deal here? Well, the Post's Washington reporter, Caitlin Dornbos, dug into the details, and she joins me now. Caitlin, obviously, this deal has a lot of facets, but what are the highlights?
Yeah, I think the real key takeaway from this meeting was seeing the really good progress as far as it goes with Chinese minerals and magnets. These are rare earth minerals. We've heard a lot of that term this year, but China has largely a monopoly on a lot of these rare earth minerals that are used in a lot of our production capabilities in our defense sphere, to our technology, to the production of semiconductors and chips. China has a real clutch on those. And for a long time this year, they have not been exporting those materials to the United States. Well, with this deal with the United States and China, it avoids the imposition of another 100% tariff on China that President Trump threatened that would actually have gone into effect on Saturday. Um, Now we're not going to see those tariffs take hold for at least another year while China again begins to export these rare earth minerals and magnets that are so critical to our own production here.
Now, I talked here on the podcast about the president saying that the Chinese fentanyl trade was number one on his list of topics with President Xi. Did we get any readout on that part of their conversation?
Whatever President Xi told President Trump, it was positive because it was enough to move President Trump to reduce a tariff that he had put on fentanyl related, or the tariff that was due to fentanyl related problems that was reduced from 20% to 10%. Now, details are a little unclear about what exactly China is going to do to cut back on those fentanyl precursors being sent into Central and South America that ultimately wind up here on our shores.
Yeah, because it's not a direct line. It's not
Yeah,
linear from
right,
fentanyl in
exactly.
China to the US. There is that like intermediary that we know the administration has also been going after.
Exactly. And I think you're seeing, the on the ground efforts there with the military efforts in Central and South America trying to get to the root of those chemicals actually coming into the United States. But China, just like with the critical minerals and oils, or critical minerals and magnets, it sends over these precursors or ingredients, if you will, to Central and South America. We see a lot of production in Mexico that they take these ingredients, mix them together, and there you get fentanyl. And
Hmm.
it gets to be really dangerous levels of chemicals that are, obviously flooding our country with opioids and really
Hmm.
nasty stuff. So I think President Trump was certainly encouraged by what he heard. He rated this meeting a 12 on a scale of 1 to 10.
That was
So,
pretty
while
big.
details, yeah, I mean, he came out really swinging hard, thinking that this was a massive success. The details are a little scant, though. So, we'll be digging into that in the coming days and weeks, I'm sure.
Now, obviously, big trade deal, dealing with the drug crisis. Those are two huge topics. But an arguably bigger topic than both of those things is the war between Russia and Ukraine. Now, in their latest drone and missile attacks, Russia killed three people, including a 7-year-old girl. They took out power as thousands of people are now dealing with temperatures dropping because winter is here. You and I discussed what a key piece of the puzzle China may be within this conflict. So, what did Presidents Xi and Trump have to say about it?
President Trump was really encouraged. I mean, surprisingly so, that President Xi was willing to help the US end this conflict.
Because
But
it seemed
then,
like
as
that
I'm
Putin and Xi were almost like cozy, which was
That's
terrifying.
the thing. Yeah, and I think that President Trump, like he thought he was going to be able to do with Putin himself, using his own relatively close relationship from the previous administration, trying to influence Putin to end his war. I think he wants the same type of aspect to be played out through China because they have a very warm relationship, China and Russia does. But talking to experts and officials in Europe as today, I am just not as convinced that China really even has any motivation to want to end its war, to want to end Russia's war on Ukraine, because not only does China help a lot with Russia winning its war, it shares military intelligence that is used to conduct strikes like the ones that you mentioned today that just killed the 7-year-old. It also provides materials that are quote unquote dual use materials. So these are things like drone parts and other capabilities that might have a commercial use, but really are used in the military sphere. And then lastly, I mean, just geopolitically, when we think about China, what does China want? Xi Jinping has been very clear that his number one priority for his leadership has been the taking of Taiwan and making Taiwan, the sovereign nation of Taiwan, Chinese. And
so it's about precedent
really,
here almost.
exactly. And so when you think about, okay, what does China get out of convincing Russia to up and leave Ukraine? It's arguably counterintuitive to say that this is something that the Chinese president would actually be interested in. We have to think about, while I think President Trump is very committed to ending the killing and he is motivated by, stopping these atrocities, not all leaders are like that. And certainly Xi Jinping, I'm going to have to see more evidence of real ways that Xi Jinping would like to see this war end, because it's easy enough to say, yes, I want this war to end in Russia's favor, or I want this war to end in a just and doable, honorable fashion.
Yeah, there's a second part to that sentence, and we don't know what the Chinese side says. And it does sound like it won't serve their long game and Xi's long game if this ends with Ukraine getting their land back. If some of it is given to Russia, then it just does set that sort of global stage for, okay, now you guys let them do it, so now you can let us do it. So that's, troubling to see a future like that. So we will have to see how that all plays out. Caitlin, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Prince Andrew is now simply Andrew Mountbatten Windsor. He has officially been stripped of all of his royal titles, including the big one, Prince, by his brother, King Charles III, thanks, of course, to his cozy relationship with convicted pedophile Jeffrey Epstein. He's also being kicked out of the taxpayer-funded royal home that he's lived in for 20 years. Oh, boo-hoo for him. Andrew will reportedly move into a property on the Sandringham estate, privately funded by King Charles. Somehow I feel like he's going to be less upset about his new address and more bummed about the Starbucks barista writing Andy on his lattes now. Now, the move comes as new allegations surfaced that the former royal continued his friendship with the billionaire creep years after he said he had severed the relationship. Now, Buckingham Palace released a statement that says in part, quote, "These censures are deemed necessary, notwithstanding the fact that he continues to deny the allegations against him." Way to put the screws to him, but really by royal standards, that's positively scathing. Deny all you want, Mr. Mountbatten Windsor, you're still just Andy to us. Now, I know we've joked that the Louvre heist was giving Ocean's 11 vibes, but we might have been onto something. 5 additional arrests were made in Paris on Thursday related to the brazen robbery, which puts us at Ocean 7 so far. Unfortunately, the millions worth of royal treasures remain missing. I promise I do not have them. One of the 5 in this latest batch of arrests is suspected of being part of the actual 4-person team that physically carried out the theft inside of the famous museum. 2 others from that team have already been nabbed, and they were charged this week after partially admitting their involvement. The Paris prosecutor who announced the arrests didn't offer any other details, like how the rest of the ones who were taken into custody on Thursday are connected to the theft. She did, however, say that one suspect was tied to the crime by their DNA. Trick or treat. A Swedish angler who was digging for worms to use as fishing bait got the treat of a lifetime when they unearthed a treasure trove of medieval artifacts. Why does this stuff never happen to me? Inside a cauldron, which is honestly just chef's kiss on this day of all days, Halloween. This person found a cauldron full of remarkably well-preserved rings, pendants, and coins. Lots of coins. And a pile of pennies it was not. Authorities are keeping the identity and the location of the find under wraps, but said that the finder was digging near their summer cottage when they made the discovery. The haul of silver weighed more than 13 pounds, according to the Swedes, and it includes up to 20,000 coins. They called it, quote, one of the largest silver hoards from the early Middle Ages ever found in Sweden. Now, under Swedish law, anyone who makes such a discovery is required to offer it to the government in exchange for cash, which, I mean, honestly, what are you going to do with 20,000 old coins? That makes more sense. And archaeologists are poring over it all now to come up with just how much money the government is going to have to shell out to this mystery fisherman or woman. The only thing I have ever found digging in my backyard was like a broken bottle of Budweiser, but the Jersey Shore and the shores of Sweden are not one and the same. Stay safe out there this Halloween evening. And when the holiday is over, I will be right here on Monday. So don't forget, like and follow the New York Postcast wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. Now that I think of it, maybe I'm lucky I didn't find it because it's Halloween and perhaps they're haunted. And guys, tonight, please don't give out apples to trick-or-treaters. Everybody hates that house.